the brands didn't understand that as they were feeding this beast too, that every sponsorship that they gave to an influencer wasn't building their brand, it was building the brand of the influencer.
This video is sponsored by Vfluencer, a multi-language competitive intelligence platform for China's digital commerce footprint. China is a complicated and a competitive market, so make sure you optimize your sales and marketing efforts with real-time data. Go to www.vfluencer.com to request a demo. Vfluencer helps your brand optimize sales and marketing in China.
Hi, I am Annie Ciara and welcome to 86 Connect's YouTube channel. Our interviews brings you market insights, consumer trends, and everything connecting you to the Chinese consumer market. Our guests are entrepreneurs and China business professionals. Today we have a very exciting guest on because we are going to be speaking to him about influencer marketing in China, Elijah Whaley. He was the former CMO of ParkLu, a premier influencer marketing technology platform that was acquired by LaunchMatrix in 2020. Elijah then went on to become the VP of marketing at LaunchMatrix, and he was also the co-founder of one of the top ranking beauty influencers on Weibo in China, Melilim Fu, also known as Maggie. Welcome, Elijah.
Thanks for having me, Annie. It was really, really nice. I'm excited to talk about this. It's been a little while since I've had an opportunity, and so this will be a little bit of a refresher for me too.
Elijah, originally you were from Omaha, Nebraska. How
Yes.
did you find yourself in the world of China and KOL marketing?
Sure. So I started my career very young. In my mid-teens, I was a video producer, and really got deep into that space and working at studios and did live video production and such. And then I started to recognize that the price of the technology was, drastically coming down, and consumer products were becoming very accessible, and the tools to be able to edit and things. And I had a feeling that, hey, and we can see it today, like AI driving technology, any disruptive technology always wipes out the middle band. And so you have the CEOs of truck driving companies are fine, and the mechanics are fine, but all the drivers are getting wiped out. I considered myself a driver. And so I decided to go back to school. I studied international business. And as I was studying, I looked at China. I said, hey, that looks like a place where a guy can hyper growth his career. And so I, get the American dream here in China. And so I came over permanently in late 2013 and started working at MarTech startups. And that's essentially what started me into the KOL space. I was a content marketing director for an agency. And every time we'd create a piece of content, it would go out to these people called KOLs for distribution or amplification. And I was like, what is this KOL thing? Someone's got to explain this to me. And after they explained it to me, I was like, this is exactly what I was afraid of with video production software and hardware becoming so accessible and easy to use. And the one thing I didn't know was that social media and this distribution would also be part of that amplification process. And so this democratization of the creation, distribution, and consumption of content really has changed the media landscape for all of us. And, we're experiencing that right now. Radio was a very exclusive format many, many years ago, and with a very, only so many channels, and now everybody can create something and everybody can consume it. And so I thought it was so interesting that I was kind of waiting for my opportunity to get into it. And I was very fortunate to orient my career really hard into that in about 2015.
So around 2015, you became the business partner of launching one of the biggest beauty bloggers in China,
Yeah.
Melilim Fu, as we have mentioned. And I read at that time she was, modeling in Hong Kong. She was a professional makeup artist, had about 20,000 followers. And now she is, rated the top ranking in 2019, has over 1.3 million followers, am I correct? How it all began and what was the goal from the very beginning?
Sure. So in the beginning, actually just met at kind of like swing dancing, like a a class, and got to know her and found out that she was a makeup artist and had particular skills. And so we started talking about, hey, what are your goals, and what are my goals? And she had kind of mentioned that, her big dream, if she had one, was to start a makeup brand. And I was kind of looking at this space going, I think what's going to happen here is that businesses are going to get built in reverse. And what that means is you're going to acquire all of the customers first, and that is going to be done through a traditional content marketing, essentially, where you're creating very specific types of content to acquire a very specific type of audience that have specific interests, and create a community around that. And then using data analytics, just what you talk about and what you hear people saying they like and want and desire, that you'll be able to create those products for those people. And you already have the sales funnel already there for you. And there wasn't a lot of people talking about this at that time, but this was my working theory, that you could build these business in reverse. And the cool thing is that you could get paid to do it. And all of your testing and all of your processing was going to be through all of these brands, because that's how the monetization of content works, is through sponsorships. And so if you're building a beauty brand and the best way to do it is with other people's money. And so essentially the idea was, hey, we can get all of these big beauty brands to sponsor our content. We talk about it, we become the expert, and then we become the trusted person, not the brand, actually, because we're brand agnostic. And just so happened that, I'm a professional content video creator, and she was professional makeup artist. And so it was kind of a match made in heaven from that perspective. And so we started collaborating, and it didn't actually take too long before we started to pick up speed. And there was some specific advantages as far as like, I used my ability as a marketer and as a writer to start blogging and talking about the what we were doing. And so I was one of the only Western people doing something like this and collaborating with a local and then writing and talking about it. So we started getting invited to talks, and which brought in brands, and it also brought in opportunities for me.
Before we get into that, I want to get into just an overview what influencer marketing is in China.
Sure.
How is it actually different from the West?
I'll start with how is it different from the West. China's integration of commerce and payments and content and social has been far ahead of the West, and at a minimum sometimes of 3 years, and in some ways even a decade. And so it has been, for a long time, you have been able to see a social post, and the contents of that post, there's typically an ability to 1 or 2 clicks to buy. So you have direct from content to commerce and payments integration super seamlessly. And these types of things are still nascent, to be honest, in the West. I think Instagram has only been doing it for maybe 2 years or something like that, where it's really seamless. And Facebook's not much different. I think Snapchat still doesn't really have that stuff. Twitter doesn't have that. YouTube definitely doesn't have it. And so they're really behind the curve that way. And so China's very much innovated in that space. And that's where one of the things that's very interesting is we have complete business models that don't even exist in the West yet. because they can't create those types of environments where you can go direct to consumer with content to commerce. And so this was really bleeding edge at the time. The first part of the question is, influencer marketing here is not too dissimilar. At the time, it wasn't too dissimilar to where it is in the West today, in that you have, essentially, it melts down to, there's an infinite range of interests that people have. And within each one of those interests, people are going to aggregate around specific topics, and whether that be games or shoes or wine. And with each one of these communities, there's going to be people who are experts or funny or content creators, and they want to share. A lot of these people really genuinely want to share their knowledge or their perspective. And if they are able to create great content and they have a really unique point of view and consistently do it, then people will start to aggregate towards them. They become trusted. And as long as they take certain measures to, curate that experience and join the community together, and there's all sorts of kind of different techniques and such that you can use, you can start to build, pretty significant audiences. And, there's some math around this kind of stuff too, that, you really don't know. There's a statement that you only need 1,000 real fans. And the reason why you only need 1,000 real fans, because if 1,000 people give you, $100 a year, that's $100,000. And for most people, that's very much a livable wage, if not far beyond most people's expectations. And so it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of young people in high school or even college are looking at this and going, hey, I want to be an influencer. It looks pretty glamorous, you make good money, and it's quite interesting. And so that's kind of what that ethos is, I guess, at its core.
You have been on both sides of the industry, right? You built an influencer, or KOL, key opinion leaders, and you have been in the tech platform, but essentially working directly with brands, but from a marketing perspective, right? KOLs, Digos, all of that, influencers that have the influence in people purchasing products from them. Tell us a little bit about that world, and how can brands find the most suitable influencers for their brand?
Sure. Well, I'll dip into just a little bit of some baseline psychology. One thing about KOLs in China that is different from the rest of the world, and I think it's actually Asia together, is that China's a high context culture and also a collectivist culture. And so people really have these rings of trust. And one of the defining features of what we call guanxi, which is relationships, and how relationships are built, is they're built through reciprocity. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand, and maybe especially in the early days of influencers and KOLs were quite critical of influencers, was they didn't understand that content has value and content is a gift. And so the creation of content literally has money for the equipment, and literally has time investment. There's an opportunity cost loss there. And then there's value to the person consuming it. That information can educate or entertain. And therefore, the person creating it and giving it to their audience for free, those people consuming it, they're consuming something of value. And in the Asian culture, that consumption is building up a relationship with someone. And most of these audiences don't have any way of transacting. They don't have any way of repaying. There's no reciprocity in it. So actually, the request, whether it be online streaming where you say, hey, I want a tip, or hey, I'm selling you a product, or support me in some way, this is an opportunity for them to transact on this reciprocity relationship. And so the value of influencers is really, really acute because of that, because it taps into this very cultural norm. And this exists all over the world, but it's just very, very strong here in the culture. And so the value of it is very real. One of the interesting aspects of it, though, and this is where I think a lot of brands have lost their way and continue to lose their way. In the very early days, a lot of brands didn't get this at all. And that's why brand social media accounts just were garbage. Just all they did was talk about their products and promote themselves. And it's one of the reasons why people who work for multi-tier marketing companies that own their own businesses, one of the reasons why they don't have any friends is because they try to sell to all their friends. And nobody wants to, that's not being social. And nobody wants to hang out with someone like that. And that's how brands acted on social media. They were very selfish. And so people gravitated towards these people that weren't selfish. They were giving content away for free. And the brands didn't understand that as they were feeding this beast too, that every sponsorship that they gave to an influencer wasn't building their brand, it was building the brand of the influencer. Because the association of who's providing something for free was the influencer, not the brand. And so the relationship and the real stickiness came to the influencer. And this is where the big projection of, hey, these people are going to launch very competitive brands one day because they have all of this built up reciprocity. And that is playing out, and it has played out, and it is going to continue to play out.
You have mentioned about, these big KOLs are actually distributing or making their own product line, like Mr. Bag. And how the influencer marketing is actually changing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what are those conversations going on in China right now?
Yeah, so I'll use a little interesting case study that I just was just on a phone call with a French jewelry brand that's not doing so well, and they're a big brand and they've been around for a long time, and they told me this very interesting story of last year, and this was actually quite low, I found out from the industry, but last year 30% of their gross sales came from collaborations with influencers. And 1 month they collaborated with Austin Lee, who's one of the top 1-2 live streamers. The collaboration with him was so costly from that they had to create special products that were co-branded with him, and his fees and the discounting that they had to do, that the cost of this campaign was so high that they had to miss salary that month with their employees, which is nuts. And, they made a bunch of money on it. And, jewelry is one of those, again, 80+% margin kind of industries. So good for them. But the upfront cost was very, very steep. And then when you start to think about the fact that, 5 minutes after their turn, every other brand is up for grabs and is selling their stuff. And again, this idea of having no brand affinity and just selling to the highest bidder is essentially how that industry works. It's a race to the bottom for these brands because they're losing control of their direct communication with customers. The only way the customers are going to buy is through heavily discounted, and that it be suggested by their favorite influencer or live streamer. And there's no relationship there with the brand. There's no loyalty. There's no affinity that you're going to refer anyone. And their next purchase is probably just going to be, if and when they buy jewelry again, is probably going to be the same type of scenario with your competitor. And this is a real problem. And this isn't just like, this is a problem for Adidas. This is a problem for major global brands that are getting just smoked because they're addicted to discounting and giving away their brand and affinity to other people. And so I've, and again, like you said it, who's winning here? Because the customers are getting products that they like at great discounts that they might not have access to otherwise, or they're going to wait for a sale if they like it anyways. And the influencers are making a killing, and the brands themselves are selling everything at a discount. Nobody likes them, and they're just burning through it. But it's so easy. It's so easy for the CMO. It's so easy for the marketers. You just put some money in the vending machine, and product sales come out the other side. And that cheat has made for a lot of really lazy brands and a lot of really lazy marketing. And there's a new breed of marketing that's coming, and there's some really interesting innovations that I've seen, and I have to give a lot of props to brands that do it right. But for those that have been addicted to that adrenaline shot of discounting and influencers, that I heard recently someone was talking about, 60+% of their gross sales came from influencers and live streaming. And once you get into those ranges, all it takes is, one of those channels to be closed off. We had cases of things like that, or a bad reputation or something, disaster, and then you could potentially be in a spiral there.
Tell us about that project, the French jewelry brand. So they worked with Austin Lee. It seems like they were at a loss in that campaign. Did that campaign give them any brand awareness or any traffic directly to their own channel? And what was the customer retention like around that campaign? Did it change anything for that brand?
No, so that brand almost went bankrupt actually shortly afterwards, and it was actually acquired by some sort of fund that's trying to turn it around right now. And essentially it's the same problem that a lot of these. Fortunately, the beauty brands don't have this problem, but the jewelry brands, I've come to find, really have this problem of each one of they have to innovate on jewelry so much. And if they don't sell out of that stock, then they have to try and sell out of it through massive discounts, which makes all your previous customers that like your brand feel bad about buying your stuff. And when they're doing all of these collaborations, they need to keep on customizing jewelry and all of these things. And it just really, really has hurt them a lot. And that's the business cycle too. I mean, this is what everybody has to go through eventually. No brand lasts forever. But I do think that the speed of the internet is speeding up the business cycle. And part of it is because there's no channel ownership. There's no intimate relationships being built with customers. There's no community building that's taking place. And it's not that I'm negative at all on influencer marketing, because I don't think brands can survive without it today. They have to do it.
Elijah, you mentioned two things there, right? And I want to get into more in depth. One is finding influencers for brands, and two is innovation. So let's start with finding influencers for brands. Going back to Maggie, I listened to one of the podcasts that you were on, and you said, you really started getting noticed around 2017. And you also mentioned it yourself, about 1.5 years into the project, big brands started approaching you. And the reason why that was because Melilim Fu accounts were being ranked on Weibo. Is that a dangerous way for brands to find KOLs to work with?
There's so many different ways I've found of assessing and working and finding influencers. My thesis from the KOL side was, we are going to make the best freaking content out there. and we just invested a lot of money into creating the content art. And now it was only created by ourselves. You don't need a big team to do a lot of these things, but we're really, really going to innovate around the quality of the content. And so one of the reasons why she became so popular with brands and sponsorships wasn't because of the size of her audience, but it was because of the quality of her content. And her content was just visually stunning, and her message and how she taught, was very, very unique that way. And so in particular cases where, hey, we want to have, whatever, this pyramid of, big influencers and medium size and, small or whatever inverted triangle approach you take, whatever, there's all sorts of theories around it now. For us, we knew that, hey, we just want to be the ones where people do it because they need to show their boss the really cool campaign that they did. And that was part of the kind of strategy there, that we had a very, very sticky audience that maybe wasn't the biggest, but we could also be the one that if they chose to put money behind amplifying the content, that they would choose ours because it was so beautiful. However, there's still a lot of reason to go with everything from top, celebrities and athletes and all of that, because they still hold a lot of clout and a lot for many, many different reasons, whether they be algorithmic within the platforms themselves or how the audiences treat them, all the way down to the niche, like really trying to understand who is valuable for your brand. And, today I'm personally much, much more interested in brands understanding who are the most valuable 1% of their customers that are these rabid advocates, that every single time a product comes out, they buy it, they talk about it, and it might not be even through the traditional channels, but it sits on their desk at work. They tell all the girls about it, and they, they just love the brand. And I think that in many ways, those are some of the untouched areas or misunderstood value of customer advocacy that's not so dissimilar from any other type of KOL.
What brand have you seen that has that 1% of customer advocacy?
Nike knocks it out of the park. They're so smart with like creating the Nike Run app is a perfect example of this. They create a world-class run tracking app. They give it away for free. They make sure at the end of your run, you have this perfectly shareable piece of content that shows where you ran, how far you ran, how much you did, what are all your calories, all that stuff. And your name's on it, and so is their little swish. And they make sure that that thing is perfectly shareable for any platform or any friends group that you want to show, hey, I did this. And so while someone is promoting themselves, something they're very proud of, that I did, part of their identity and their health and fitness and a badge of honor, that this is supported by Nike. And that's a way of really, really tapping into all of some of the things we've talked about actually.
In China, there are different tiered KOLs, right? The top tier KOLs all the way down to mid to lower end, and then you've got KOCs. Can you describe what the different tier KOLs are in China, as well as how do brands then, when they do a marketing campaign, how do brands distribute into the different tiered KOLs?
So we have, this kind of celebrity top rung. And even in the celebrity top rung now, there's some KOLs that have crossed over where they're almost to that celebrity level, in that whether their ability to influence or their cost is kind of in that level, like Austin Lee might be there, or a Via before she got deleted. And then you have this kind of tier down who are going to be influencers that, it depends on the platform, because the size of the following is really dependent upon the popularity of the platform. Something like a Weibo, which has, whatever 400 million users, active users in a month, where its influencers can have, a big influencer might have upwards of 10 million followers, where on a Xiaohongshu or Little Red Book, they only have 100 million monthly active users. So a big influencer there is probably just a million or a couple million. I believe there's a misunderstanding around a micro KOL, which is a KOL that might have, let's say on a given platform, 10,000 followers to 500,000 followers. And they're considered, often they're newer creators, because, if you're not making it after a certain point, you give up. And so or there are a lot of manufactured creators. So there's a lot of accounts out there that are, whether they're bot created, or they're, someone in the countryside that's getting paid a small fee to curate content and stuff like that. Their face isn't shown, they're just curating content. And then we have what we call KOC here. And KOC, the word for it is key opinion customers. A lot of people interpret that, a lot of marketers interpret it as small tier influencers or micro influencers. That was the substitute that a lot of people use. But I think, from my opinion, micro influencers and KOC are vastly different beasts, because a micro influencer is brand agnostic. Their goal is to monetize their content. Their goal is to grow. They have many different attributes that are very different from a KOC, where a KOC is a key opinion customer. So they have brand preference. Their main goal is to influence their family and friends. They are creators, but their goal isn't to become a big influencer. They're just doing this because they're passionate. And they're typically more lifestyle oriented. They don't have a specific niche that they talk about. As far as how a brand would maybe create a campaign is, you're going to have, maybe one really, really big celebrity. Then you'll have a couple of top tier influencers, many mid-tier influencers, and, a huge swath potentially of micro influencers. And then the real goal here of the best campaigns is to generate a type of campaign that motivates KOC to create content. So whatever those mechanisms might be, like, submit your content to create our next commercial, or, share this and get a discount, or whatever that thing is, the activation on social often shouldn't be to sell at certain tiers. It should be to reproduce after itself. And it's that reproduction of content, and really understanding things like the influence of the Dunbar number. That means that every one of us have 150 people that we actually have close, influential relationships with. And so if I can get one KOC to buy my stuff, I know that I can probably get somewhere in the range of, a 5 to 10% conversion rate from them, because they're such strong advocates. So I can get somewhere between, 3 to 15 sales from one sale. And so this activation of KOC is very, very important.
Speaking about live streaming, it was the hot topic last year. Tell us a little bit more about live streaming. Where are we now in terms of the market industry, and where is it going from your opinion?
Yeah, so, the commerce platforms really heated up really perfectly, as far as they had made bets in social media live or commerce live streaming back in 2018, and it was just perfectly primed for COVID. But what was really interesting is during COVID, what we saw was that, hey, there was all these people that didn't have anything to do because they couldn't go into the stores themselves, the shopkeepers, and people were getting desperate too. CEOs are looking at this going, my business is about to be obliterated here. And that's where we started seeing everything from salespeople to CEOs managing and launching and hosting live streams. And it was a very, very interesting time. And that's really where it's funny how it's kind of like war is the best time of innovation. it's this time of desperation was one of the best times for brands to say, oh, we need to own our own channels and we need to start using our assets to create content and talk to our customers and build community and offer value that way on top of selling stuff.
That's leads to my next question, which is the two big new buzzword of this year: Metaverse, NFTs, blockchain. What have you seen in China, and how has Chinese consumers adapted to this, or is it a certain early adopters that only have adapted to this? What's going on over there?
When it comes to NFTs and Metaverse, NFTs still are essentially illegal because Chinese cannot put money into the crypto system. And I would even say that probably this is an area that China lags behind in probably many ways of innovation, is in the Metaverse thing. But I also think that the Metaverse is way, way, way overhyped at this time, and that this is going to take a lot longer, probably longer than even Facebook has money for, as far as when it's really going to be a driver of massive amounts of commerce. But it's coming. And I have no doubt of that, because essentially the way that, even the way that a marketer or like an architect will market himself and sell his goods in the future will be so different, because you will go into the Metaverse and architects will be able to not just build you your digital house, but this will be an opportunity to show you what they can do offline. And you will click to buy and say, I want to work with that architect. And this is how they're going to sell their goods in the future. And that's going to be for everything. And so this blending of offline and online will be, I think the buying of the online world is interesting and people will like that. There will be plenty of it, but it will be a way of transacting in the offline world just as much as it is in the online world.
I have seen quite a bit with luxury brands on driving traffic from Douyin, like placing ads on Douyin and driving traffic to their commerce store, whether their own channels or on Tmall and so on and so forth. How is that changing in terms of the customer journey from discovery to the transaction? Is Douyin going to be the next big discovery channel? I mean, I think it is now, right? It is the discovery channel for consumers of actually finding new products or finding new brands. Can you explain a little bit about that ecosystem?
So I have a very, very close friend who joined ByteDance to work on the TikTok algorithm back in 2018, I think. And when he joined that long ago, they were already talking about that their goal was to be the video storefront for commerce. And so their plan has always been really, really to get away from ads, essentially, and to become this commerce platform. And that transition just takes a lot of time. But there's the start of it is through creating very, very intricate and very, very interesting algorithms that tap into the weaknesses of the human mind for addiction, And so how can we get this dopamine hits that people are getting through liking and scanning content to also be part of the purchase decision behavior process? And they've launched their own mini programs, functions, they have their own stores, they have their own payments, and they are, and their search engine is, they have visual search, and you can literally take a video and search for someone's face or some sort of item and such. And so it's, a lot of people talk about Web 3.0, kind of being built on the back of blockchain, and maybe it will be, but this is kind of an example of like what's next when it comes to search and commerce and content. Again, I always bet on the people that are essentially giving something away for free, building a relationship, and then have some sort of cognitive advantage that gets you to stay in their loop. And the JDs and Alibaba's, they don't have that element built into their technology and into their purchase behavior cycle.
So Elijah, what is the future of influencer marketing?
I don't know exactly. I think we're a little bit right now at a lull in innovation, if I'm really honest. Like, I think that for sure, our version of TikTok, Douyin, is going to become a video storefront and is going to increasingly take market share away from the traditional JD, Taobao, Tmall's. And the same is true for Kuaishou and such. I'm very sure of what's coming next. And it's an innovation that's going to take a little bit more time, but you can already see sprinkles of it. And that is, we're going to go into a full, almost everything is commercialized content format, meaning that today when we watch, some TV show or some video on our on social or our preferred content platform, in the future, how it will be different is everything that you see, you'll be able to buy. Whether we go from 2D displays that everything is clickable and purchasable, that's really the future that I foresee.
What is your China business mistake?
I think it's probably like most business mistakes that people have anywhere, is aligning yourself with the wrong people. It always comes down to people. It always comes down to people. Life is about relationships. And so no matter where you are, who you're in a relationship matters most.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Elijah. Really appreciate it. We have learned so much from you in regards to influencer marketing. And if you want to get in touch with Elijah, his LinkedIn and his website is down in the description below. Get in contact with him about China influencer marketing. And thank you so much for your time today.